Hello, my name is Tom Schaefer. I'm pastor of Faith United Lutheran Church in Toledo, Ohio. And I've got a guest with me today. He sometimes comes into my office. So this is Rascal, our rescue schnauzer. We've had him for a little over a month now. And so he's going to be in the background here, hopefully not being too much of a problem. But thought I'd introduce you. There he is. Good boy. All right, let's put you down. And thank you for joining us for Faith United Online. A reading from Genesis, the 27th and the 28th chapter. When Isaac was old and his eyes were dim so that he could not see, he called his elder son Esau and said to him, "My son." And he answered, "Here I am." He said, "See, I am old. I do not know the day of my death. Now then, take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me. Then prepare for me a savory food such as I like, and bring it to me to eat, so that I may bless you before I die." Then Rebekah took the best garments of her elder son Esau, which were with her in the house, and put them on her younger son Jacob. And she put the skins of the kids on his hands and on the smooth part of his neck. Then she handed the savory food and the bread that she had prepared to her son Jacob. So he went in to his father and said, "My father." And he said, "Here I am. Who are you, my son?" Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Now sit up and eat of my game so that you may bless me." But Isaac said to his son, "How is it that you have found it so quickly, my son?" He answered, "Because the Lord your God granted me success." Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Come near me that I may feel you, my son, to know whether you are really my son Esau or not." So Jacob went up to his father Isaac. He felt him and said, "The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau." He did not recognize him because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands. So he blessed him. Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. He went to a certain place and stayed there for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place. And he dreamed that there was a ladder set up on the earth, the top of it reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And the Lord stood beside him and said, "I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and to your offspring. And your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth. And you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you and in your offspring. Know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised." Then Jacob woke up from his sleep and said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." And he was afraid and said, "How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven." To understand the story, we need to know the whole story of Jacob, really. And it begins as most stories do at the beginning. In other words, Jacob's birth. But this is no ordinary birth, and his father is no ordinary person. Jacob is born the son of Isaac, the son of Abraham. And Isaac, you remember, is the child of the promise, the child of the covenant that God made with Abraham. God told Abraham that the world would be blessed through his lineage, and that blessing was handed down to Isaac. And now Isaac would hand it down to his oldest son. But that wasn't Jacob. You see, Jacob was born a twin, and his brother Esau was born before him. Now, twins are still rare today, but in the ancient Middle East, they were exceptionally rare. It was a difficult pregnancy for his mother, Rebekah. So she prayed to God and asked God what was to become of her and her children. The answer Rebekah received would have an impact on the rest of Esau's and Jacob's lives. God said, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples born of you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other. The elder shall serve the younger." Two nations, brothers who are divided, and the firstborn Esau would serve the younger, who is Jacob. From the moment of their birth, this division, this strife was apparent between the two of them. When Esau emerged from the womb, a small hand was clasping his ankle as if to pull him back into the womb, as if the younger son was contesting the birthright of the oldest with his first breath. That's why he's given the name Jacob, which means heel grabber. As they grow in years, Esau proves to be a strong and gifted hunter, an outdoorsman, a man's man, and he is his daddy's favorite. After all, being the firstborn son, the blessing will be handed down to him, or at least Isaac thought so. Jacob, on the other hand, well, in Genesis chapter 25, verse 27, it says, "He was a quiet boy who lives in tents." He was a real mama's boy. Now, years go by, and Isaac has become an old man. He's frail, his sight is gone, and he's bedridden. Isaac knows he doesn't have long for this world, and it's time to pass on the blessing of God. Now, this is an important thing. The blessing once given is an oath, a covenant, an unbreakable promise, just as it was when given to Isaac by his father and given to his father Abraham before him by God. So Isaac calls in his favorite son, his eldest son, Esau. And he says to Esau, "Do for me one last time what you had done so many times. Go hunting and make a stew for me, the stew that I love." Now, Esau loves his father dearly, so he takes his bow and his quiver and he sets out to give his father what he wants. And Isaac promises to give him the long-awaited blessing when he returns. But little did Isaac and Esau know that there was someone else in the shadows listening. It was Rebekah. And as we know, Rebekah loved Jacob more than she loved Esau. Immediately, Rebekah hatched a plan to get the blessing of Jacob, to get the blessing for Jacob rather than Esau. After all, she reasoned, it's what God had promised. Since this was about to happen, Rebekah determined that God must need her help. Even if her plan required making a liar and a cheat of her son, she would disguise Jacob as Esau and make him a stew to take into his father. He would have to deceive his father and say that he was Esau, and then he would ask for and receive the blessing. So Rebekah dressed her son Jacob in some of Esau's dirty, sweaty clothes. Being an outdoorsy kind of guy, Esau apparently had a certain stink about him. Now Esau, it seems, also was quite hairy, so Rebekah also glued goat's hair all over Jacob's arms and face and neck. And then Jacob went in to trick his dying, blind father out of the blessing he meant to give to Esau. And it worked, at a price. Here's the thing, and this is a really important thing for you to know. When we think we have to do God's work for him, it is always going to end up bad. God said that Jacob would be the greater of the two brothers. God said that Jacob would carry on the blessing first given to Abraham, but Rebekah and Jacob didn't trust that God was going to get it done. So they took matters into their own hands, and the result? It tore their family apart. Soon after the deception, Esau returns, and then both Isaac and his son Esau realize that they've been duped. But the blessing's irrevocable. It is a promise once given that can't be taken back. And Isaac is heartbroken. His son pleads for a promise, but Isaac has none to give him. All he can muster are these none too encouraging words for his son Esau. He says to him, "See, away from the fatness of the earth you shall he says, "See, away from the fatness of the earth shall your home be, and away from the dew of heaven on high. By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. But when you break loose, you shall break his yoke from your neck." Esau cried out and promised that as soon as his father died... All right, somehow I knew that would happen. Someone came to the door when it never happens when I'm recording, and it was, of course, when my dog is here. But I'm back, and let's get back to our story. And here's what happens, is that after this deceit happens, Esau promises that as soon as his father died, he would kill his brother Jacob. Now, Rebekah heard about this promise that Esau had made. So she warned Jacob and told him that he needed to run. He had the blessing, but now he was a fugitive. And this began a series of conflicts and bad decisions by both brothers, but something began to happen to Jacob. The man he really was, the man he was meant to be, began to emerge. And it was then, on a lonely night under the stars, that God came to Jacob. And he showed Jacob a ladder. The word can also be translated as stairway, and so what we have here is a literal stairway to heaven. And between Jacob and God, a constant flow of angels ascended and descended the stairs. God was showing Jacob that through everything that had happened, that God was never far from him. That God knew everything that had happened to him. And now that Jacob had grown into the man that God always knew he would be, that God had planned for him to be all along, God would give him the blessing that he could never truly steal. And so God stands next to him and says, "I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. All the families of the earth shall be blessed in you and your offspring. Know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go." Jacob names the place Bethel, the house of God, and exclaims, "Surely the Lord is in this place." But he also knows now, as God has promised, that wherever he goes, God is there with him, looking out for him. This is the beginning of Jacob, the blessed one, the one who is the patriarch of his people, not because he stole it, but because God ordained it. From this time on, God and the people would no longer just say the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac, but they would add, and the God of Jacob. Later, he would become known as Israel, which means one who has wrestled with God, which is surely something Jacob did much of his life. He wrestled with who he was, who God wanted him to be. He wrestled with being faithful, but in the end, and only by the grace of God, he succeeded. I think there's three things we can learn here, three lessons to learn. And the first is this: you can run, but you can't hide. Jacob, by taking matters into his own hands, even if at the instigating of his overprotective mother, makes a mess of his life. So he runs from all the problems that he's made for himself. And you can do that. You can run from your problems. But as Jacob finds out, you can't hide from God. In Psalm 139, the psalmist writes, "Where can I go from your spirit, or where can I flee from your presence?" And ultimately, the writer says, there's nowhere that I can hide from God. You can run from your problems, but you can't hide from God. And that brings us to the second lesson we learn. God knows you better than you know yourself. As we've just heard, there's nothing you can hide from God. The good and the bad you've done, decisions you've made for the right and wrong reasons, things you've thought but never did, God knows them all. God really knows you. But get this, God also knows everything you can and will do. God knows who you can and will be. That's the way it was with Jacob. When he was born, God knew the leader he could and would become. God knew the possibility of faith that welled within him, even when he was the quiet mama's boy who lived in tents. Even when he was a liar and a deceiver, God never gave up on him because God knew him better than he knew himself. And finally, number 3, God works all things for good. St. Paul says it this way in Romans 8. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. God had a calling on Jacob's life. And though Jacob did a lot of things to try to undermine that calling, God had a plan. We see that truth again and again in Scripture. Joseph's arrogance gets him into trouble with his brothers, but God had a plan and worked it for good. Moses' temper causes him to kill a man, and he has to flee Egypt, but God had a plan and he worked it for good. Paul's religious zeal turns him into a persecutor, but God had a plan and he worked it for good. Some of us may feel we have screwed our lives up beyond repair. Maybe sometimes we do the right things, but we do them for the wrong reasons, and sometimes we do the wrong things even when we think we're doing them for the right reasons. Maybe we've hurt others for our own gain. Maybe we are a lot like Jacob. Well then, learn what Jacob learned. It's never too late when God has a plan. Hey, thank you for joining us this week. It was a little bit of a challenge, but do appreciate you joining us, and please do hit the subscription button, hit the notification bell, and share this message with somebody else if you think it would be of any help to them. God bless. Have a great week.